Have you ever found yourself paralyzed, with a dream in your heart but lacking the courage to start? Have you ever put it off so long that you even doubt whether you're still capable of change? If you're between 18 and 35 years old and seeking real transformation but feel stuck in inertia, this video is for you. The secret isn't waiting for the perfect moment, it's taking the first step with clarity and courage, even without certainty. Stoicism, the philosophy used by Marco Aurelius and Epictetus, teaches how to act with discipline, even in the face of fear. And it's that first step that changes everything. If you want to finally get out of this rut, watch until the end. 1. The weight of not starting. Have you ever felt stuck, even though you want to change? You have a dream, a goal, a plan, but somehow, something is always missing. Courage, certainty, the right moment. You postpone, rethink, overanalyze, and in the end, you don't start. This paralysis carries a silent but real weight. It's the frustration of knowing you're capable, but not acting. It's waking up with the feeling that time is passing, while you remain in the same place. It's looking back and realizing that another year has passed, and your life hasn't changed. The problem isn't a lack of motivation, talent, or opportunity. It's fear. Fear of failure. Fear of not being good enough. Fear of starting and discovering you can't finish. It's precisely this fear that keeps you immobile, not the lack of resources, but the presence of doubt. But what if I told you that you don't need everything right to begin? That the first step doesn't require perfection, guarantees, or inspiration? That the secret to changing everything isn't in endless planning but in taking action, even when afraid? This is where Stoicism comes in, a practical philosophy used by emperors, slaves, and thinkers who faced wars, loss, and uncertainty. They didn't wait to feel ready. They acted with discipline, clarity, and courage, even when everything around them was chaos. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in history, wrote, "Begin what you want to do now. Do not postpone life." Epictetus, born a slave, taught that freedom begins when you decide to act, even without complete control. And Seneca reminded us, it is not lack of time, it is lack of will that holds us back. This video is not about changing everything at once, it's about taking the first step, the most important of all, because it's the first step that breaks inertia, it's the first step that turns one day into today, and it's the first step that will take you from where you are to where you want to be. If you're tired of postponing your life, watch until the end, because what comes next may be exactly the push you need. So, why you don't start? Even though you want to change, you want to change. You want to grow. You want to start that project. Change careers. Take care of your health. Write. Start your own business. Live with more purpose. But even with all this desire, you don't start. And the truth is, it's not for lack of will, it's because of invisible obstacles that live inside your mind. The first of these is the fear of failure. Not the fear of trying and failing, but the fear of being judged, of exposing yourself, of discovering that you might not be good enough. This fear doesn't scream, it whispers. It says things like, what if it fails? What if people laugh? What if I try hard and it's not worth it in the end? And with that, you put it off, and time passes. Then comes perfectionism, an enemy disguised as a virtue. It doesn't stop you from wanting to improve. It stops you from starting, because nothing is good enough. The plan isn't 100% ready. The timing isn't ideal. You need more knowledge, more resources, more confidence. But perfection doesn't exist, and while you wait for it, life goes on. There's also information overload. Today you have access to thousands of methods, strategies, gurus, and routines. So many options paralyze you. Instead of taking action, you spend your time researching, comparing, and analyzing. And in the end, what should help you knowledge becomes just another excuse not to start. And finally, the dependence on motivation. You believe you need to feel inspired, excited, and full of energy to act. But motivation is volatile. It comes and goes. And if you only act when you feel good, you'll spend your life waiting. All of these factors create a trap. Paralysis by analysis. You want to change, but you demand perfect conditions to act. And because the world is uncertain, the ideal moment never arrives. But Stoicism offers a radical solution. Don't wait. Start now, even if you're not sure, even if you're afraid, even if it's imperfect, because the first step doesn't have to be big, it just needs to be taken. And that's what changes everything. 3. What is Stoicism? The philosophy of conscious actions. It is not a theoretical philosophy, it is a practical tool for acting courageously, even in the face of uncertainty. It originated in ancient Greece around the 3rd century BC, founded by Zeno of Citium, but it was in the Roman Empire that it became a life discipline for men facing the greatest challenges: war, betrayal, slavery, and constant pressure. Greatest exponents, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca, came from opposite worlds, but shared the same quest: how to live with clarity, courage, and purpose, even when everything around them was crumbling. Marcus Aurelius, the world's most powerful emperor, ruled a collapsing empire, beset by disease, betrayal, and conflict. Yet he wrote in his personal journal, Meditations, what hinders action? Nothing but what is in one's mind. He didn't wait to feel motivated. He acted with duty, discipline, and clarity. Epictetus was born a slave, with a crippled leg, and who lived under constant oppression, but he taught that true freedom lies not in circumstances but in choosing one's own response. Men are not disturbed by things, but by the opinions they hold about them, he said. For him, real slavery wasn't physical, it was emotional, and liberation began with a decision to act with integrity, even without complete control. Seneca, one of the richest men in Rome, faced exile, envy, and death threats. Even surrounded by luxury, he chose to live with simplicity and purpose. He knew that it is not what we have, but what we do with what we have, that defines us. What unites these three men: the belief that changing your life begins with a decision, not with a perfect state. Stoicism is not about waiting for inspiration, it is about daily discipline, mental clarity, and conscious action. It is a simple practice. Focus on what you control, act with purpose, and begin even without certainty. And that is exactly what you need to take the first step for, the first principle. Start with what you control. The most powerful principle of Stoicism, and the most liberating, is this: focus only on what is within your control. Everything else results, other people's opinions, unforeseen events. The future doesn't deserve your energy, because you can't dominate the world, but you can dominate your actions. This distinction is the key to overcoming paralysis. Most people don't start because they're waiting for perfect conditions, the right moment, the ideal motivation, the guarantee of success. But the Stoic knows there will never be certainty. And yet, you must act. What is not under your control, what others think of you, whether your project will be successful, whether they will criticize, ignore, or reject you. The past, the future, the behavior of those around you are real factors, but beyond your direct control. You can influence them, but never control them. What is under your control? Your choices, your efforts, your intentions, your attitude toward obstacles. The decision to begin or not. This is where your true power lies. When you focus on this, something profound happens. Insecurity loses its power to paralyze you. Stop saying, "I'll only start when I'm sure," and start saying, "I'll start now, because it's up to me." For example, you want to start a business but you're afraid of failing. Failure, it's not under your control. But creating the plan, researching, preparing the first quote, sending the first proposal, all of that is so. Start there. You want to write a book but you think you don't have the talent. Other people's talent. You can't control it. Writing a page a day. Yes, so write. You want to change careers but you're afraid of not being accepted. The employer's decision, it's not yours. But updating your resume, studying, submitting your application, those are your choices, so do it. As Epictetus said, the wise man doesn't wait for ideal conditions, he makes do with what he has. And that's exactly what changes everything. You don't need to control the outcome, you just need to take the first step with clarity and courage. Because it's by taking action, even when you're afraid, that you break out of inertia, and that's when real change begins. 5. How to take action even without motivation. Motivation is like a rocket. It gives a strong boost at first, but it soon runs out. You start a new habit with enthusiasm, going to the gym, studying, writing, but 2 days later, the energy fades and everything stops, and then you think you failed. But the problem wasn't a lack of motivation, it was relying on it to act. Stoicism, which teaches a much more powerful alternative, discipline. While motivation is volatile and dependent on emotions, discipline is reliable, consistent, and always available. Just have to decide to use it. Marcus Aurelius didn't wake up every day wanting to rule an empire. Some mornings he just wanted to rest, but he acted out of duty, out of commitment to his role. He knew that leadership didn't depend on how he felt, but on the daily choice to do what was necessary, and that's exactly what Stoicism brings. The courage to act even when you don't feel like it. You don't need to feel inspired to get started. You just need to understand that action comes before motivation, not after. It's in action that impulse is born. Rise is not the other way around. The key is to start small, 5 minutes. That's it. Open the document. Put on your sneakers, write a sentence, make a phone call. The important thing is to break inertia, because the biggest obstacle is not the effort, but the first move. The Stoics call this immediate action. Don't think. Don't negotiate with yourself. Get up and do it. Today, you may not want to wake up early, but if your principle is taking care of my health, you get up. You may not want to study, but if your value is growth, you open the book. Discipline doesn't eliminate tiredness, laziness, or doubt. It acts despite them. And that's what separates those who change from those who remain stagnant. Not the absence of difficulties, but the decision to move forward anyway. As Seneca said, it's not lack of time, it's lack of will that holds us back. But willpower doesn't come out of nowhere. It's exercised. Every time you choose to act, even without motivation, you strengthen your ability to change, and that's how you begin to transform everything. Not with grand gestures, but with small, courageous choices every day. Even when you don't want to. 6. The power of small starts. Why 1% changes everything. Most people believe that change requires a heroic gesture. Starting to work out for an hour a day, reading 50 books a year, starting a business from scratch in a week. And that's why many never start, because they expect to be able to do everything right, all at once. But the truth is that real transformation doesn't begin with grand actions. It begins with small, consistent steps. Stoicism doesn't demand perfection. It demands progress, and the first step doesn't need to be grand, it just needs to be taken. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Don't be disturbed by the size of the task. Do what is necessary." Small actions, repeated with discipline, build great results. He knew that the emperor who rules the world begins by governing himself, and that begins with a small but intentional choice. You don't need to write a book today, you just need to write a sentence. You don't need to become an athlete, you just need to walk 10 minutes. You don't need to master a new language, you just need to hear a sentence spoken out loud. You don't need to change careers tomorrow. You just need to search for a job. These actions seem insignificant, but they have a quiet power. They break inertia. And when you take that first step, something changes. You stop being a spectator of your life and become an agent of it. Furthermore, small actions generate psychological momentum. Writing a sentence leads to a page. Walking 10 minutes turns into 20. Researching a job paves the way for an application. It's the law of cumulative action. Small, repeated choices transform your reality. Stoicism deeply values this. Epictetus said, "Don't expect to be a philosopher one day. Practice philosophy every day." In other words, don't expect to become the person you want to be. Start acting like it today, even if it's just 1%, because it's in the small that the great is born. It's at the very least that movement begins, and it's with that first 1% that you prove to yourself, I can begin. And once you begin, the only real direction is forward. 7. How to deal with the fear of failure. The fear of failure is one of the greatest enemies of the first step. It's not failure itself that paralyzes, it's what you imagine it means. I'll seem incompetent, I'll waste time, I'll prove myself incapable. But Stoicism offers a liberating perspective. Failure isn't the end, it's part of the journey. Marcus Aurelius, who faced wars, betrayals and disease, wrote, "The obstacle to progress becomes the journey itself." For him, every difficulty was an opportunity to practice courage, patience, and justice. Failure didn't invalidate your purpose, it tested your commitment to it. And this is exactly what Stoicism teaches. Failure isn't a sign of weakness, but of action. Those who never fail, never try, and those who never try, never change. One of Stoicism's most powerful tools for facing this fear is premeditatio malorum, the rational anticipation of the worst. Instead of being frightened by what might go wrong, you imagine it clearly. What if I'm rejected? What if no one is interested? What if I make a public mistake? But instead of freezing, you respond. If I'm rejected, I learn and try again. If no one is interested, I adjust and move on. If I make a mistake, I acknowledge it, correct it, and move on. By facing the worst in advance, you disarm fear. It loses its power of surprise, and you discover that, even in the worst-case scenario, you can move forward. But furthermore, Stoicism teaches that adjusting course is not giving up. You can fail in a project, but maintain your purpose. You can be criticized, but continue acting with integrity. The important thing isn't never making a mistake, it's never stopping, Seneca said. It's not what happens, but how you respond. What defines who you are. You don't need immediate success, you just need to keep going. Because in the end, the biggest failure isn't making a mistake, it's never having started, and the first step, even if it leads to a mistake, is always a step forward. 8. Stoic routine. To start with consistency. Change doesn't happen by accident, it happens through the conscious repetition of habits aligned with your purpose. And the Stoics knew this better than anyone. They didn't rely on motivation, they built a daily routine that kept them going, even when the world around them was chaotic. This routine isn't about extreme productivity or magical self-help. It's about clarity, discipline, and consistent action, exactly what you need to turn that first step into continuous movement. Morning. Start with intention. 5-10 minutes. Don't start your day reacting to your phone or notifications. Start with a question. Who do I want to be today? What is my next step? How will I act even if not feeling motivated? Write a simple intention. Today I take the first step, or today I focus on what's in my control. It's a mental preparation ritual, like tying your shoes before a run during the day. Reflective pauses. 30 seconds to 2 minutes. When fear, doubt, or laziness arise, stop, breathe, ask, is this within my control? What can I do now, even if it's small? These pauses are like adjustments to the rudder. They keep you from drifting unintentionally, and they keep you focused on what really matters. Night review and reconnection. 5 minutes before bed. Grab a notebook and answer, what did I do today that brings me closer to my goal? Where could I have done better? What do I take with me into tomorrow? This isn't about judgment, but about responsibility. Seneca reviewed his day as if he were accountable to himself. This habit strengthens self-awareness and corrects your course before small deviations become a misstep. Over time, this routine becomes a natural rhythm of action. You stop relying on the emotion of the moment and start acting with purpose. And that's how Step doesn't just become the first, it becomes the beginning of everything. 9. How to stay on track. When everything discourages you, take the first step, maybe even a few more. But then comes the criticism, the delay, the rejection, the silence. No one seems to notice, nothing seems to change, and then discouragement sets in. Enthusiasm fades. You think, is it even worth continuing? It's at this point that most give up. Not for lack of a dream, but for lack of emotional resilience. And that's where Stoicism shows its true power. The Stoics didn't believe in easy success. They believed in persistence with purpose. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire at war, surrounded by betrayals, but he wrote them all down. The days do what is right, the rest doesn't matter. He didn't act to be seen. He acted because it was his duty. It's this mindset that keeps you moving, even when no one applauds. When you understand that the value of your action doesn't depend on others' responses, you no longer need validation to move forward. You continue, because you're aligned with who you want to be, not with what others expect. Seneca said, "It's not what happens but how you respond that defines your life." Unfair criticism. It doesn't have to define you. A rejected project. It's not the end, it's an adjustment. A bad day. It's just a day. Stoicism teaches us to act with integrity, even when no one is looking. It's easy to be disciplined when you're motivated. It's difficult and powerful to be disciplined when you're tired, ignored or doubted. And that's exactly what separates those who change from those who give up. Great change doesn't require perfection. It requires continuity, one step after another, even slowly, even in silence, even without recognition, because in the end, what matters isn't whether you failed, it's whether you continued. And it's this daily commitment to the path that transforms a small beginning. Gento, a great transformation. Point 10. Legacy begins with a choice. Great changes rarely begin with a bang, begin with silence, with a courageous decision made in an ordinary moment by someone who chose to act, even in fear. Marcus Aurelius didn't change the world with an epic decree. He changed it with a daily choice, writing, reflecting, governing himself before governing the empire. Epictetus didn't free thousands with an army. He freed minds with a phrase, "You are not what happens to you. You are what you decide to be." Later, Seneca didn't transform Rome with a single movement. He transformed generations with letters written in moments of exile and pain. Legacy isn't built on memorable days, it's built on forgettable days. In that moment when you choose to wake up early, even when you're tired, when you decide to speak the truth, even when it's inconvenient, when you submit your candidacy, even when you're not sure, when you continue, even without applause. The St. Economics teaches that every action aligned with your values is a building block in your legacy. You don't need to be seen to be important. You don't need to be famous to be significant. Just live with in silence. Think, what will be the story you'll tell about yourself at the end of your life? Will it be about what you stopped yourself from doing out of fear, or about what you did, even without guarantees? Because legacy isn't what others say about you, it's what your choices prove you are. It's the courage to start when everything told you to wait. It's the discipline to keep going when no one was looking. It's being true to yourself, even when it was easier to betray your values. And it all starts with a choice. It doesn't have to be grand, it just has to be true. You don't have to change the world today. You just have to take one step that aligns you with who you want to be. Write a sentence, make a phone call, say no to procrastination. Get up when everything inside you wants to give up. These small actions, repeated with purpose, build a life that doesn't get lost in time. They build a life that, even without the spotlight, inspires by example. And this is how a legacy begins, not with a shout, but with a step taken in silence, with courage today. 11. Final conclusion, start now. Because the time is now. The ideal moment doesn't exist. It is created by a single choice. To begin, you don't need more time, more certainty, or more motivation. You only need now, because time doesn't come back, and every day you put it off is one day less to live the life you want. This video wasn't about theory, it was about action, about recognizing that change doesn't begin in the distant future. It begins in the next minute, in the next decision, the next decision, the next step, no matter how small. Already know what you need to do now. The only question that matters is, will you do it? Because Stoicism isn't for those who feel ready, it's for those who decide to act. Even if they don't, it's for those who choose discipline over excuses, courage over fear, purity over fear, purity over procrastination. Because the world doesn't need more people waiting, it needs people who start, even if they're imperfect, even if they're afraid, but they start. And that's how everything changes. One step, one day, one choice. Now you don't need more time, more motivation, or perfect conditions to change your life. You just need one step. The first one, the one that breaks inertia, that turns one day into today, that proves to yourself that it's possible to start. Throughout this video, you saw how Stoicism is not a distant philosophy, but a practical tool for acting courageously, even in the face of fear. You learned that what you control is the only place you should focus your energy. Discipline is more reliable than motivation. Small actions, repeated consistently, build big changes. Failure is not the end, it's part of the journey, and that, even when everything discourages you, you can continue out of duty, not applause. True transformation doesn't begin with a grand event. It begins with a simple choice: waking up 10 minutes earlier, writing a sentence, making an important call, or simply deciding, today, I'm starting. You don't have to be perfect. You just need to be consistent, and each time you act, even without feeling like it, you strengthen your mind, regain your power, and move closer to what you truly want. So, don't wait. Choose a habit, a principle, a small step, and put it into practice today. If this content resonated with you, like it, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel for more videos on inner strength, purpose, and real change. Because what separates the life you have from the life you want isn't talent, luck, or resources. It's the courage to take the first step, and it only depends on one person.